Historically, Oklahoma is a really good football school, and they produce a ton of high-level running backs, with the most noteworthy guy probably being Adrian Peterson, but there have just been so many players, and I could list a ton, but we're not going to worry about that right now. The guy we're going to focus on today is, in my opinion, the missing piece to a potential 2021 college football playoff run for the Oklahoma Sooners. As we know, 2 years ago they made the playoff and got blown out by LSU, and last year after they lost to Kansas State and Iowa State, they just didn't have enough in the tank to get them back to the playoff. But right now they have Spencer Rattler, a ton of really talented weapons at wide receiver, with guys like Marvin Mims, Jaden Hasselwood, Trajan Bridges, and Theo Weiss. They also have some solid running backs, but there is one guy in particular who I think is the X factor of this team, and he is a guy who just transferred into the program. His name is Eric Gray, and in case you have not heard of him, he was a guy who started to break out in the 2019 season for the Tennessee Volunteers, but last year he really started to shine, and he was one of the top pieces on a team that really didn't do that well. A lot of bad news circulated around the Tennessee program, and Eric Gray was one of the first guys to bolt. He is a future NFL running back down the road in my opinion, and I think he'll be the number one guy in the backfield next to Rattler next year. Today we're going to briefly talk about the rise of Eric Gray, what he means to this Oklahoma offense, and why I think that Oklahoma is going to make a playoff run this year, and how he can be the X factor for that. But first, if you love college football content on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, as you will not want to miss out on the journey of this channel and all the great video topics I'll have this off season. If you want to support the videos I'm doing on YouTube, please be sure to give the video a like, as that helps to get in the algorithm so more people can see it and I can continue to put more time into this. Also, let me know any suggestion for any sort of topic you have. I consider and read all your guys' comments, so please let me know another player or topic I could do next. And finally, turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload and no videos ever get lost. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about Eric Gray and Oklahoma football. Before we talk about how Oklahoma is a playoff contender with Gray, let's first talk about how Eric Gray became a big-time player to begin with. He grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and obviously loved football from a young age. He didn't actually play much as a freshman in high school, but once he became a sophomore, he became a superstar. He was named Tennessee's Mr. Football after rushing for over 2,200 yards and 38 touchdowns as just a sophomore, which is just absolutely insane. As a junior, it got even better, as he ran for over 3,000 yards and 45 touchdowns, and was the Tennessee Gatorade Football Player of the Year, and repeated as Tennessee's Mr. Football. He was rated as a 4-star recruit at this point, and practically every school in the nation wanted this kid on their team, and he initially committed to play for a big-time school that puts a lot of running backs into the NFL, in the Michigan Wolverines. He did that in the summer before his senior year. He'd actually be able to relax in his last season, and then go thereafter, but things would change a little bit. He had another massive year on the ground and won the Mr. Football Award for the third straight time, and towards the end of his season, he decided to decommit from Michigan and reopened his recruitment. He ultimately would commit to play at Tennessee a few weeks later after teasing some fans at the announcement ceremony, but he would become a volunteer. He said, quote, "I fell in love with Knoxville going down there so many times. I didn't get a chance to go to Michigan really as much, but just being there in Knoxville with Coach Pruitt and the assistants, it was really a family atmosphere, and that's why I chose it." So yeah, he was a guy who was a big-time name in the state, and ended up choosing to stay for Jeremy Pruitt, and that was a huge recruiting win. And honestly, this reminded me a lot of the Jalen Hurd story, as he was a big-time Tennessee high school football prodigy who chose to take his talents to Tennessee when Butch Jones was there, and he was seen as a must-get prospect, and Gray was seen as the same way amongst the Vol elite, amongst the Vol faithful. Plus, it also reminds me of it because Hurd would not finish his career as a Tennessee Volunteer, and would actually head over to the Big 12 just like Gray would. According to 24/7 Sports, Eric Gray was a 4-star recruit, number 3 all-purpose back, and the 184th overall player in the class of 2019. Going into the 2019 season, Tennessee was under head coach Jeremy Pruitt, and they were expected to take the next step up. Gray would start out behind both Tim Jordan and Ty Chandler at running back, but he would get a chance to play as a freshman. They lost both Georgia State and BYU in heartbreaking fashion, and it was definitely a tough way for him to start out his career as the program was under fire. He did have a ton of carries in that BYU game though, but he would not get many touches until the end of the season. Tennessee was winning games at this point, and against Vanderbilt, Gray would rush the ball 25 times for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a 94-yard run, which is actually 10th all-time in SEC conference history. This was definitely a game of the ages for Eric Gray and a freshman, and he put his name all over the freshman rushing record books for that game. It wouldn't end there for him in 2019, as he earned MVP honors in their Gator Bowl win over Indiana, as he helped them on both the onside kick and in their game-winning touchdown. He emerged late in that 2019 season, and he led Tennessee with 4 rushing touchdowns and finished second on the team with 539 yards. He was seen as a bright young star in both the SEC and the college football world, and 2020 was supposed to be the year that the Volunteers could compete for the SEC East crown, and they began ranked. He was a starting running back and scored a touchdown in their first close win over South Carolina, and then had 100+ yards on the ground against Missouri. And all of a sudden, the Volunteers were 2-0 for their primetime matchup with Georgia. They're actually honestly playing like the better team in the first half against Georgia at halftime, but they obviously blew it in the second half and got blown out. And then Tennessee would go on a major losing streak, and everything would fall apart. He would put up over 100 yards in losses to Kentucky, Arkansas, and Auburn, and his talent was definitely not leading to wins, and it was probably frustrating. He cooled off the finish of the year and did not play in their season finale. He finished the 2019 campaign with 772 rushing yards with 4 touchdowns, and he also was the second best receiver on the team with 30 passes catched out of the backfield, as he caught 30 passes out of the backfield for 254 yards and 2 more touchdowns. His 1,026 total yards accounted for more than 29% of Tennessee's total output, and his 187 combined carries meant he touched the football on more than 28% of Tennessee's offensive snaps, which is just wild, and he was definitely the best player on that offense. Tennessee, as we all know, would fire Jeremy Pruitt, and the program would get in hot water with the NCAA, plus the season was an absolute disaster, so things were not exactly going well or looking bright for Gray's future. After that, he decided to put his name into the transfer portal, and right away, big-name schools would come knocking on the door, but he had this to say to Tennessee Nation. Quote, "Vol Nation, I love you guys. You've been unbelievably supportive. Tennessee will forever be my home. You are the best fans in the country, and I just want to say thank you for giving the young kid out of Memphis an opportunity to play at the next level. You are my family." Obviously, it did mean a lot to him, but not enough for him to stay and go through these dark seasons, as he wanted to win football games and get to the NFL. So as we've already talked about, he entered the portal and had a lot of big schools knocking on his door, and it would ultimately come down to Oklahoma and Texas, and he would eventually commit to the Sooners. But what does this mean for Oklahoma football, and why is he the X factor in this offense? Let's go ahead and talk about that now. TJ Pledger and Ramondre Stevenson are now both gone from the program, so that leaves returning running back Kennedy Brooks, who has started multiple games for the Sooners over the past few years. I expect this to be a fierce battle in camp for the starting spot, and ultimately both of them will probably get around the same amount of carries when it's all said and done, and both be a major factor in the run game. Oklahoma would lose those 2 guys, plus they didn't sign a running back in their 21 class, so that is why they added Gray on the roster, and they will definitely not regret that. With Spencer Rattler getting a lot better towards the end of the year, many think he'll be the next great Sooner quarterback and be a player who can both win the Heisman Trophy and get a ring in 2021. They have so many talented weapons in the passing game with young superstar Marvin Mims and former 5-star recruits Theo Weiss and Jaden Hasselwood, and Jaden was a great player as a freshman before he tore his ACL before last year. There's other guys on the roster as well, and the wide receiver talent and quarterback talent is obviously there, but we have seen that in the past, and I think that the running back position, specifically Gray, is what will make the difference and will allow them to win it all this year. Tennessee fans knew this guy was absolutely talented, and one sports writer said, quote, "Eric Gray had a chance to be among the Mount Rushmore of Tennessee running backs. Yeah, he did end up leaving, but he was more than just a running back, and that is why he is the X factor." Oklahoma will have all their talented playmakers, a good runner in Kennedy Brooks, then you have a guy like Gray coming in who can come out of the backfield and catch passes as a wide receiver, return kicks, and then run the ball like a running back. This makes an already good Oklahoma team that much better and even tougher to defend. He's also known as a guy who can play any down, as one Tennessee reporter said, quote, "Gray surged late in his freshman season, and he showed the capability to be an every down back. His ability to make a cut, get north and south, and always fall forward makes him a tough out for any defense he faces." This is the definition of an X factor in my opinion, and I think that we will finally see Oklahoma get to the college football playoff again and finally put 2 wins together for them to get a ring, and Gray will be a big part of that. But this is all just my opinion and a theory of mine, and I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of Eric Gray and this Oklahoma team? Can the Sooners reach the playoff and maybe actually win it this year? Can Spencer Rattler win the Heisman? And also let me know another topic like this I could do next. Before you go, be sure to give the video a like if you want to support today's video so more people can see it and the channel can do better. Subscribe if you have not already. Suggest another future topic down in the comment section. And check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon. But until next time, peace.